Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're setting the stage for an encounter that fundamentally, and I mean completely, changed human history. We're looking back to a very specific moment in time when two entirely different realities, two completely different ways of existing on this planet, suddenly came face to face. We're talking, of course, about the arrival of Christopher Columbus in the New World and the devastating ripple effects that followed.
Okay, let's dive into this. What exactly happens when an absolute frantic search for gold collides with a world that doesn't even have a concept of wealth as we know it? It's a tragic irony, really. On one side, you have this empire that is just obsessed with riches, and on the other, a society completely devoid of the 15th century European concept of ownership.
Part 1. Guests from the Sky. The initial arrival in the New World. So, picture this. It's the morning of October 12, 1492. Columbus's ships make landfall on an island the Native Americans called Guanahani, which Columbus promptly dubbed San Salvador. Now look at this strictly from the perspective of the Native Americans. Seeing these massive, imposing ships and armed men wearing incredibly colorful clothes, it caused a massive stir. To them, it literally felt as if these strange guests had descended straight from heaven. The natives showed innocent, awestruck generosity. They lived in modest thatched huts, grew corn, and swam right out to the boats offering food, drinks, and these beautiful, colorful parrots. But Columbus? He saw something entirely different. He saw people who were simple, who possessed no grand palaces and no weapons. But crucially, he noticed some were wearing earrings made of pure gold.
It's honestly chilling to read Columbus's actual diary entry about this. He literally wrote that these people had no iron or steel, didn't know how to use weapons, and could be crushed and persuaded to do whatever he wanted with the help of just 50 men. He saw their innocence not as a virtue, but as a total vulnerability. Columbus and his crew immediately took advantage of this simplicity, ransacking their thatched huts, just turning things over, desperately searching for more of that gold.
Section 2. Chasing Marco Polo, the quest for Asian wealth.
To really understand Columbus's actions, we have to get inside his head. His entire worldview, his entire mission, was anchored in the travelogues of Marco Polo. Columbus was absolutely convinced that by sailing this western route, he was going to hit Asia. He wasn't looking for a new world, he was looking for the wealth of the old one. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds. This wasn't just one landing, it was a rapid, increasingly confused island-hopping campaign. From San Salvador in October, he moves to Cuba, then to Hispaniola by December, before his return voyage in January. He's frantically bouncing from island to island, desperately searching for Cipango, Japan, and the rich cities of China. The steps he takes out of sheer frustration are super revealing. First, he forcibly captures Native Americans, imprisoning them on his ship to act as guides. Of course, these guides had never even heard of China or Japan, but they did know of a big island, so they guided him to Cuba. Columbus was fully convinced he was about to reach the grand Chinese city Marco Polo called Olive, which we know today as Quanzhou. But when he arrived, no grand magnificent cities, and most frustratingly for him, absolutely no gold bars, just more gold earrings.
Section 3. The Tragedy of Hispaniola. The true climax of the expedition.
So, right around December 5th, frustrated and fighting contrary winds along the coast of Cuba, Columbus's ships get blown about 100 kilometers off course to another island the locals called Haiti. On December 6th, he lands and formally renames it Hispaniola, the island shared today by the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And here is where we need to pause on this staggering number: 800,000. That is the estimated population of the Arawak people living on Hispaniola at the time. Much like the folks on the previous islands, these 800,000 people warmly welcomed Columbus's crew, completely unaware of the absolute devastation these alien visitors were about to bring to their shores. It is an incredibly heavy, tragic historical reality that this specific landing on Hispaniola marked the beginning of the destruction of the Native Americans. Because of the events set in motion right here, this era is actually referred to by some historians as the American Holocaust, the start of a devastating genocide of the native populations.
Section 4. A Golden Delusion. Columbus's Biblical Beliefs. Once on Hispaniola, Columbus falls into this deep religious delusion. Driven by his biblical background, he genuinely believed that outside the stories of the Bible, no unknown world even existed. So he thought he had found the legendary region where King Solomon sourced his gold and gems. And these delusions were fueled by small, agonizing hints of wealth. He and his men are seeing scattered gold particles in the rivers. Plus, a local chief actually presented Columbus with a mask made of pure gold. This just made him incredibly impatient. He became absolutely convinced that the locals were intentionally hiding the vast, endless wealth that Marco Polo had promised.
But here's the bitter irony of this whole thing. In the 15th century, Columbus is finding only scattered gold particles in the sand. But in modern reality, it's estimated that Hispaniola, specifically modern-day Haiti, sits on upwards of $20 billion in mineral deposits. We're talking gold, silver, copper. The wealth actually was there. Columbus simply lacked the modern extraction tools to dig it out of the earth.
Section 5. The Admiral's Dark Return. A sudden change of plans.
This brings us to a massive turning point. Columbus's flagship actually runs aground off the coast of Santa Maria, Haiti. This means he has one less ship and can't bring all his men back to Spain. He has to change his plans on the fly, which marks a very dark turn for the island. His companions literally broke apart the wrecked vessel, took the wooden planks, and built a small fort they named Fort Navidad. Columbus stationed 49 of his men there with one very strict order: explore every nook and cranny of the island and find the gold. And ominously, right around this time, the very first fatal clashes occurred. His crew killed 2 natives simply because they refused to hand over their bows and arrows.
With Fort Navidad established and his 49 men left behind to essentially tear the island apart looking for wealth, Columbus finally sets sail. On January 16, 1493, he heads for Spain to report his findings.
The journey back was absolutely brutal, especially for the innocent people he took with him. Columbus forcibly took Native Americans as slaves to present to the Spanish rulers. The conditions were so horrific that many of these enslaved natives actually froze to death on the journey across the Atlantic. Alongside the captives, he brought back just enough gold and spices to ensure his political opponents in Spain wouldn't mock him. He had to prove he found what he promised.
And get this, the Spanish rulers bought it completely. They fully believed he had successfully discovered a brand new western route to Asia. As a reward, Columbus was celebrated, brought right into the Spanish aristocracy, and officially crowned with the title he had been promised all along, Admiral of the Sea. Feasts and celebrations were thrown in his honor everywhere he went. Yet history tells us that even as he was being celebrated, he was also mocked at some of his own feasts. Why? Well, he had supposedly found a new world, but in doing so, he left 800,000 completely innocent natives facing an impending doom on just one island. How did these people, armed with nothing but simple tools, face the dangerous weapons of the incoming European forces? What were the exact charges eventually brought against Columbus, and how did his final days actually play out? We are going to unpack all of those shocking historical details in our next explainer. Thanks so much for joining me.